Hello, my name is Norma, and I'm a real alcoholic. I'm always grateful to share my experience, strength, and hope, but I'm more grateful to get to know people like Judy and Al, Kay and John, and all of the different individuals I've had the privilege of getting to know over the last many years. Too many to name, so please don't put me on your resentment list. And, grateful to know the people that are not here anymore, which, the list grows as we grow. And that's life. It's something we all have to surrender to. But there are some things that never die, and that is the love and the fire and the spark of our fellowship, our purpose, and our God. So as I said, my name is Norma, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is August 1st, 1983. I have a home group. It's the 12 at 12 in Austin, Texas. I have a sponsor, Dear Polly P., quite a pistol. And I have a number of sponsees who shall remain nameless for their good and mine. And I'm here to share my experience, strength, and hope in the experience of AA on steps 4, 5, 6, and 7. One of our founders remarked once that individual interpretation of the steps, there is none. But there is a difference in our individual experiences with the steps. And that's what I'd like to share about. Step 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. What are we searching for? The truth. Fearless, because we now have the courage to face the things in ourselves that caused our failure. Moral, because now we're developing a manner of living that demands rigorous honesty. Inventory, if we want to experience the reward of a spiritual life, it's time to take stock. Step 4 is about forgiveness, healing, and freedom, and removing those things that stand between us and God, blocking us from the sunlight of the Spirit. It's where I look at the manifestation of self, the connection between anger, resentment, and fear. The Big Book explains that lack of power is our problem. That doesn't mean we don't have any power. We do. We have power to hurt and to hate and to exercise the tools of selfishness and self-will. And, this kind of power, unfortunately, doesn't work. Or I should say fortunately, it doesn't work to solve our life problems, so we end up on page, 52, 53, miserable, depressed, obsessed, useless, and not far from a drink. In that state, the Big Book says, it had the power to kill. What state? The state of fear. We had to look at the cause and conditions of our life. The cause, selfishness, the condition, fear. One driving the other. Today I'm constantly moving between two worlds, the world of self driven by fear and the world of the Spirit, God's world. Dr. Paul, one of my favorite alcoholics, wrote about acceptance, and that part of the book we're all no doubt familiar with. But in another book he also wrote about powerlessness and how admitting powerlessness finally allows us choice. Today I can choose to resent, to be angry, to be afraid, to be bitter, to be unforgiving, or I can choose to love and live by spiritual principles. To exercise tolerance, pity, patience, and love. To choose to let go and to let God and humbly rely upon Him. It's said we have no choice when it comes to drink, yet we are sober. What happened? I believe that when we entered the world of the Spirit and found the grace of God, the needed power was there. Power that allowed choice where there was none before. And it is my privilege today to practice the process of surrender, self-appraisal, and service. These are the things that keep me on the beam in the great reality and out of self-serving ways of living. Step 4 is a significant step because the action behind it does lead to the truth about ourselves, about how our viewpoint, our attitude, our blaming kept us stagnant, and that everything that caused my resentment was actually fear disguised. Fear about the 5 areas of our life mentioned in the Big Book inventory. Fear that was always a part of every day. That was really about selfishness. Me not getting what I want. Me worrying about losing what I had. And the Big Book describes 3 kinds of fear: worry, remorse, and morbid reflection. Worry about what's going to happen today. Remorse about what happened yesterday. Morbid reflection about what's going to happen tomorrow. Well, let's look at what step 4 is not. One AA member said that step 4 was not designed to engage the alcoholic in a full-scale amateur psychoanalytic process so he can understand the vast working of his complicated mind. I would agree. It's not about why we are terminally unique, but about our common manifestations, the manifestation of self as it erupts in resentment, anger, and fear. The good news is not only do we have a common problem, we have a common solution. Everything we have in AA begins and ends with God. And it's important to note that we are not professionals. AA is not an organization, and our help is not therapeutic. We are a fellowship, spiritual in nature, and we offer spiritual aid for a spiritual malady. AA always examines how we are the same. We have a common problem, a common parallel, common manifestations. Individual uniqueness is not the focus. Now about sex. Everybody laughs when the sex inventory is brought up as a topic in the meeting, but relationships take out more of our membership than hardly anything else. It's really not a laughing matter. And the sex conduct is really just an extension of the fear inventory. It's not about the physical act of sex. It's about our lack of intimacy and about our motives within a relationship. As a woman, I was familiar during my drinking years about how to get my material and emotional needs met, and a few drinks on the side, through relationships. Fear of being alone made me rush headlong into a bad relationship before I really knew the character of the person I was dealing with. Fear of financial instability made me seek out relationships to be secure, not out of love or appreciation of that other person. Self-esteem issues made me pick someone who people liked. And he was, I was just an extension of that other person. And I gained prestige by being with him. I got my way in the world through what we like to call the power of the panty. I got what I wanted, whatever I wanted, but I used people like Kleenex. It was still all about power, money, property, prestige, the same demons that we struggle with in other areas of the fear inventory. And when I hurt long enough, and when I failed over and over, I finally appealed to God. And I began to develop intimacy with the God of my understanding before I could learn how to be intimate with others. It was important to seek God's will first, not a husband. And to take time to find out about the character, values, priorities of another individual, to develop intimacy on spiritual levels, intellectual levels, friendship levels, long before physical intimacy occurred. Because a kiss is not a promise. When I would be physically intimate before spiritually intimate, the friendship would stop. And I was usually living in the potential, not the reality of that relationship. It was only after I inventoried my motives for how I had hurt others, made amends, and became willing to shape a sound and sane ideal for a future life with another human being, using the prayer at the bottom of page 69. Did God begin to change me into the kind of person that would attract a healthy person into my life? Because water is always going to seek its own level. So long as I stayed sick, guess who I got? Sick. I gained in integrity and dignity. I surrendered this area of my life to God. And soon after, I met Blind Dave. And God joined us together in our purposes. And he's in the middle of everything we do. God is in the middle, not Dave. And it's been that way for the last 24 years. I've heard it said in meetings to utilize, not analyze. Thinking too much gets people like us in trouble. And as we say, we can't solve the problem with the problem, our mind. So to try to make what we're doing an academic experience, an intellectual thing, is to take away its power. Someone wrote that doing constant 4 steps or playing musical sponsors is another form of self-centered behavior. So our program of action is spiritual, not academic, based on self-sacrifice, not self-serving actions and attitudes. In fact, our 4th step clearly reveals this. The things I focused on, the resentments and the mistakes I made actually kept me separated from other people and separated from God. But in the big book, there is a beautiful promise that when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. And when we treat the spiritual malady through steps 4, 5, 6, and 7, then another promise comes along. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. Fear, the spiritual condition, not the emotional state. The condition of life that brought us to a point of desperation. And the only way to get rid of this fear was to stop giving power to others and to give power to the God of my understanding, to begin a new basis of living, a shift in reality, a shift from the world of self-driven by fear. You know, that dog-eat-dog way of life where competition, jealousy, and one-upmanship driven by ego and obsession. That world, move over into the world of the Spirit, the great reality, the 4th dimension of living in the present moment, trusting God with every step and every breath. Our book doesn't really say to forgive others who we resent, but it asks us to ask God to remove our anger. That implies forgiveness. And it also mentions that we may have made a mistake. Now, in some cases, being able to surrender such resentments can be challenging and only accomplished by those who are so desperate to stay sober that will do anything. But how do you forgive someone who may have hurt you, hurt the people you love, done so much damage it can't be undone? Is prayer alone enough? Can I forgive someone who has been abusive? For perpetrators that have victimized me or my children? How do you come to a place of forgiveness for these kind of things? It's not about what they did or didn't do. There's many wrongs that happen in life that are never right and in which we do not have a part. For instance, child abuse, rape, incest, family violence. These are terrible things, and they're not right in man's world or in God's eyes. What they did was wrong and always will be. My only part is holding on to the anger around it. You know, these events can become God in our life if we allow them. If we're wanting to be the judge, juror, jailer, and executor and have not asked God to remove our anger, which becomes first resentment and then obsession and then self-pity, we're still playing God. And that anger is killing us and ruining today. Someone once said, if I get slapped across the face, I might be angry in that moment, rightfully so. But if 10 years later I'm still angry, whose fault is that? Some people like to blame everything in life that is wrong on someone else's crimes, but that's giving power to a human, giving power to a certain event, and saying that if it wasn't for this, I'd be happy. But that denies the power of God and makes something or someone else God instead. And I've found that it's not as much about who I am and what I do as it is about who God is God is willing to extend mercy and forgiveness to all, no matter what they've done in the past. And that includes me and all I've done to hurt others. So the question is not really, can I forgive? But can God forgive? When looking at a person who has done me great harm, I ask myself this: if that person ever came to a point in their life that they felt regret and wanted to change, would I be okay with God forgiving him mercy as he did to me? That is true surrender and forgiveness. Forgetting the wrongs others have done. I can only do that if God has more power than that other person. I had a great experience with step 4 in my first year of sobriety because I had a family member who I was at odds with. In fact, I hated him, and it was my father. Family violence and alcoholism had destroyed trust and closeness and love, and I had years to nurse my resentments toward this man when I was in the disease. And there were other sick people in my social circle who were egging me on, encouraging me to hate him, to hurt him, to steal from him. His name was first on my inventory, and I didn't think I had anything to apologize for. I hadn't done anything wrong, but my sponsor said I needed to repair some damage if I wanted to get sober and stay sober, which I did want to. So I wrote him a letter, cursing everything as I went along. It was a general apology for anything I might have done to hurt him. He showed up a week later on my doorstep. He came to Austin a lot to visit my sisters, never came to my house. He knew he wasn't welcome. But there we were, sitting at my little kitchen table, and we talked about the weather. Trivial things, but it was a beginning. And our relationship began to heal. And it was only later, as I continued on my spiritual course, that God began to reveal to me all the things that I had done to hurt my dad. Withdrawing love, coming to his house on holidays but never directly speaking to him, humiliating him with my hostile attitude in front of his friends. Never once did I thank him for paying my way through college, for keeping the family together after he had to leave my alcoholic mom, showing tolerance and love toward me when I was intolerable, lending me money when I was in need. Of course, it was only after I had a son, went through all the throes of teenage arrogance with him, that I appreciated everything my dad had done and all I had not done. And I remember when he tried to make amends to me, I was about 20, still angry, resolute in my unforgiving attitude. And he cried while trying to say he was sorry for not being the father that he should have been. I just let him suffer as I ignored him. Thanks to recovery, I made it up 100 times to him in many ways. He knew I loved him before he died a few weeks ago. At his memorial, a military funeral, I spoke of his many accomplishments, outstanding characteristics, his heroism as a father, as an educator, his service and other courageous heroes fighting for our nation. And I spoke of how many people in my life had let me down, but that my father would always be a hero to me. It's amazing how our perspective can change with a little bit of God. There are many people who have suggestions for newcomers on how to do step 4, and I have a few suggestions to add. Keep it simple. Just do it. One girl came over. She'd been kind of dragging her feet. She sat on the couch, and I opened the book. She said, "Aren't we going to talk?" And I said, "About what?" She said, "Well, don't you want to get to know me?" And I said, "I do know you." More than you know yourself. Should your name be on the list? Perhaps, usually under remorse. But it's unimportant. What's important is not to dwell too much on any one part of the inventory, but to move through it to the solution at the end. The Big Book says we tell, not write our life story. What is that life story? What do you write, really? I mean, look at what it shows in the Big Book. 10 words beside each different reason. That's a good guideline. 10 words. I have one last comment on step 4. Many of us share our emotions or reactions about step 4. Perhaps that it was frightening, or that it brought shame, or that we had a bad experience. I wonder how things would change within our fellowship if we focused instead on the freedom it brought. How it's not about what we did wrong, but about what God would have us do that is right. Perhaps there would be more people making it if we helped remove some of the prejudice around this step. Page 46 in the 12 and 12 says, the sponsor probably points out that the newcomer had some assets which could be noted along with his liabilities. This tends to clear away morbidity and encourage balance. As soon as he begins to be more objective, the newcomer can fearlessly, rather than fearfully, look at his own defects. I have another 2 hours yet to go. Okay, good. Now step 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Now that we know the truth about ourselves and how fear and resentment is connected, how the problem is not outside of us but inside of us, we're ready for step 5. What is the nature of our wrongs? It is the selfish, self-centered nature common to all of mankind. Conversely, the nature of God is good. Dave always says that after a lifetime of being hounded by alcoholism, the curse which was constantly upon him, the first thing God did in his great goodness and mercy was to take that curse and turn it into a gift. As it says in our Big Book, in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have, the key to life and happiness for others. Bill writes in step 5 about telling your life story. Does this mean everything that ever happened to you? I think not. I think it refers to the things we would prefer to avoid telling others. Certain episodes we vaguely remember. The worst items in stock. The things we hope will never see the light of day. I've often heard it said, if I don't do the 5th, I might be drinking the 5th. I had one of these dark secrets in my first year. I had a strange experience in recovery. I came in and no one would sponsor me. I asked 4 different women. They all said no. I think I was too scary for them. But there were a lot of people that were inexperienced. I was in a group that had mainly wives, Al-Anons. It was more older men that kind of carried me through. And there was one woman who spoke at a big meeting, and I went up to her and I said, would you please do my 5th step with me, just one part, you know? So she agreed. And, you know, it was a terrible thing I had done, something I have never shared with anyone except her. And it was hard to admit it, but it was burning in my soul. And she was so beautiful because she had compassion and experience that helped me see it in a different light, that allowed me to come to a place of forgiving myself. And then I had a sponsee come along many years later. She had done the same thing. And I was able to turn around and pass that experience on and bring her to a place of forgiveness. We who have been unable to be honest with ourselves, the Big Book says, frequently lie to others and have never been able to come clean until now, as a last resort, we are faced with alcoholic destruction, or picking up the tools that will break through the delusion that we have managed life well. And again, during step 5, it's important to remember that AA is not professional. There are no AA counselors. There are no AA therapists. What we have to share is 2 things: how we identify as alcoholics and what our shared experience is. And with that experience, compassion. Compassion only another alcoholic can have with another alcoholic. As we go to God with these things. One alcoholic talking to another with God in the middle, leading us to humility, honesty, fearlessness that is necessary to live that spiritual life. Now, Dave and I have had many people tromping in and out of our house. Many people have prayed in our living room rug or in one of the back rooms. Many tears shed. There have been many moments that I consider sacred moments where I watched God free someone and they walked out of the house a different person. Step 5 is almost like a initiation process into the world of the Spirit. And I consider it a privilege to participate with God in those kind of minor miracles. One thing I find interesting, throughout the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill W. made a number of construction references, which eventually led to the building of an archway. And it's the archway to freedom that completes the 5th step. I'd like to share with you the other references because I like to reflect upon what Bill wrote. Bill begins with the bedrock. We perceive that only through utter defeat are we able to take our first steps toward liberation and strength. Our admission of personal powerlessness turns out to finally be the firm bedrock upon which a happy and purposeful life may be built. The foundation. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. The cement. The feeling of having shared a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us, but that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. The cornerstone. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say that he does believe, or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. The keystone. This is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal, we are his agents. He is the father, we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we passed to freedom. And then there is the foundation stone. Helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. And finally, the path to freedom. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything, for we're building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put in the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? David A., another one of my favorite alcoholics, spoke of the 12 steps like a bicycle with 12 spokes. Remove one spoke, you can still function, but you lack stability. Remove 2 spokes or 3, you're going to fall. Bill's description of our spiritual structure or spiritual makeup and the relationships between them describe the elements that spell success. Not material success, although that can be a side effect, but success as a person. I'm really grateful when I came into AA that they did not offer simply to put their work on a service plane, a charity plane, and offer to find me a place to rent, a job, a babysitter, a dating service, a loan, or make my bills. I did have a few unsavory offers, but I turned them down. AA taught me how to be the kind of person that can keep a job. Taught me how to be responsible enough to pay my bills. How to become healthy in my interactions with others so I could develop friendships that grew into long-term commitments. And how to be a healthy mother, sister, daughter, friend, employer, employee. I became a successful person because the focus was on the internal, not the external. The fifth step concludes with a beautiful paragraph that says, once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We feel we are on a broad highway, walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. This, my friends, is the greatest love story ever told. To walk peacefully, hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. What an incredibly intimate scene. To stroll along the sunlight beach with God, His hand in yours, your newfound friend, comrades forever, under whose protection and care you will always reside. It demonstrates that not only do I belong to God, God belongs to me. And that makes what I believe about God to be vital. Now, step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Our big book has little on step 6 because it was written early in our experience as a fellowship. People that wrote the big book, how much sobriety did they have? 6 months to 3 years. And they were still developing their character defects, I'm sure. But after many years of having time to practice the principles and develop the traditions, Bill was able to add more insight of his personal experiences in the 12 and 12. And God promises more will be revealed. That's been true in my life. That we will grow in understanding and effectiveness. Understanding of God, effectiveness, and service. And I think it's in the 12 and 12 that it says it's a spiritual axiom that any time we are disturbed, the problem lies within us. Is that right, Dave? Thank you. So my problems don't come at me, they come through me, from me, through fear. My problems don't come at me, they come from me through fear, our primary emotion. Everything else is a secondary emotion, and our character defects stem from this: anger, resentment, jealousy, pride, so on and so forth. Our primary asset is love, and all secondary assets come from this: patience, tolerance, forgiveness, faith, hope. Bill wrote in 1958 on emotional sobriety, "Those adolescent urges that many of us have for top approval," he writes, "perfect security and perfect romance. These are quite appropriate at age 17, but they prove to be an impossible way of life when we're 47 or 57. Suddenly, I realized what the matter was. My basic flaw had been dependence, almost absolute dependence, on people or circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and the like. Failing to get these things according to my perfectionist dreams and specifications, I fought for them. And when defeat came, so did my depression." You see, when we go to other people for those third column needs of security, self-esteem, prestige, as I described in my early years, those people are going to fail us. Bill writes, "My dependency meant demand. Demand for possession and control of people and conditions surrounded me." And then with Father Dowling's help, he realized that surrender, service, and love was the answer. And he began to focus on living the prayer of St. Francis. see, our perspective of life warps the truth and reality. We're looking through the shades of our past and our fear. Fear in relationships, intimacy, ambitions, finance, self-esteem, etc. For step 6, to become ready and willing, is a process that may require some introspection. Asking questions like, exactly what character defect stands in the way of my forgiveness of this other person? What does my fear really make me do? Alcoholics are delusional people. We're under the delusion that we can manage life well, but our external situation, where our character defects come out as weapons against the world, is really a reflection of our internal situation. Worry, remorse, morbid reflection, self-pity, and the like. So in order for me to understand how self manifests through character defects, I find it important to understand the fear behind it. What does that look like? Fear that I will be alone, so I better find the first available man to marry, no matter what the cost to my personal dignity. Fear that I won't have enough money, so I better work all I can today or spend all I can today. Don't listen to that one, Dave. Fear that you don't like me, so I better find a way to really impress you, or I better become an expert people pleaser, or I better hurt you before you hurt me. Building a wall. Fear that I'm not good enough, so I do 110% more than the rest of you, to the point of mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion. When I have fear in a certain situation, I look at the fear, look at how it is manifesting. What does that fear make me do? Is it making me blame others, retaliate, resent, isolate, depress? Then I ask myself, what would God have me do? What would it take for me to do His will today in this troubling situation? Usually it comes down to having to trust God with something or someone. I have to examine other things, like, am I powerless? Do I need to accept something? Is there something I haven't let go of? Do I have an amends to make? And finally, I pray, and my prayer goes something like this. Dear God, I've been experiencing difficulty at work, for example. I've had a lot of fear that I'm not going to do as good a job as I'm expected, and I've made a few mistakes recently. Fear around this has made me blame others, act resentful, make excuses, hide the truth, avoid people. I'm sorry I've been so dishonest, afraid, and angry. Please guide me to do your will. Give me the strength and direction to do the right thing and to trust you with my future. Help me accept I'm human and will be less perfect some days, and to be honest when I've failed, and to find ways to do things differently, and to understand that I'm powerless in some situations, but that I've truly done my best and don't have to let one moment in my life define me. Give me the courage to make amends quickly and remove my fear and direct my attention to what you would have me be. There's an old AA saying, you can take the drunk out of the gutter, but how do you take the gutter out of the drunk? That takes the grace of God. The grace of God, hearing the truth in the rooms, identifying with the pain, but the pain combined with the truth becomes motivating. I remember, again, in my early years of sobriety, sitting in the rooms, and I would look over at a lady that I admired, and I thought, wow, I wish I could be like her. She just seemed to have so much dignity, courage, strength. And I felt like the opposite, always the victim, always crying. And, you know, she gave me something to reach for just by her example. And I remember making a decision that day, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. I'm not going to use tears to get attention. I'm going to suit up and show up, and I'm going to face life. You never know what you may be doing just by showing up and being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Step 7, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Every step in our program has a gift, a promise, and a prayer. And this is true with our 7th step as well. My Creator, I am willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character. That's our promise. That stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. That's our gift. Everybody wins. Grant me strength to go out from here to do your bidding. That's the prayer. You know, without God and our own human strength, we lack the needed power, purpose, and passion. My experience with a bad character defect came one year when I was working as an educator in a small school in West Austin, and I had an attitude that I was just a little bit a step above everybody else, because you see, I had a few letters behind my name, and I knew it all. And pretty soon, nobody was talking to me. After some work with a sponsor, I realized that my arrogance had affected my relationships. I was hurt, embarrassed, and at a loss. Saying I'm sorry would have fell flat after all I had done and said. So I had to demonstrate love. Every day I went around to every single other staff member and found something complimentary to say. Every day. Every person there. Took some time, but it turned around. They forgave me, and things went on in a normal course. Had my first taste of a little humility served with a bit of humble pie. God takes all of me, the good and the bad. Isn't it amazing how God takes our worst aspect, our self-centered importance and self-sufficiency, and turns it into something that others can gain by? Because, you know, what do alcoholics love to do the most? Talk about themselves. That's what we get to do. We get to share our experience, strength, and hope. And it helps others, and it helps us as we gain in integrity, humility, and simplicity. In God's universe, nothing is wasted. He recycles people, and he reconstructs a new world that everyone benefits from. I'm always astonished at how far down people can go that are still afflicted by the disease, because we have a progressive disease. But you know, it's progressive the other way too, because there's no ceiling to spiritual growth or to where God will take you. I want to close with these thoughts. God will always reveal to us the truth we seek as we continue to grow in recovery. Sometimes his voice comes like a clap of thunder, and we're instantly aware of his will. Other times, his presence is like a gradual dawn on a peaceful morning. But God will orchestrate everything in his life toward his purpose if we allow him to. I used to pray for many things: money, love, children. Now I pray for other things: humility, courage, compassion. My prayers have changed as I have changed. Now, I don't try to change AA, the Big Book, or our fellowship. I let AA change me through the Big Book, through the fellowship, and through God's guidance. And I want to thank you very much, because it's been an honor and a pleasure to share my experience, strength, and hope on the steps. And I hope we can all continue to try to see the best in each other as we trust each other, trust God, and trust AA. Thank you very much, and God bless.